find if we just play that major triad and then lower our thumb, or whatever your bottom note is, to the minor seventh. So we're just going to lower it a full step. And you'll hear that.
So are you leaving out the root?
I'm leaving out the root.
Okay.
When you're playing jazz, if you're playing with a group, the bass player is responsible for the root and for the fifth. And they'll play other things too. Pianist is responsible for the third and seventh. But if you're playing by yourself too, it's still okay. You can play that kind of voicing and then play the root with your left hand. And you get a really great jazz sound. Okay. So let's go through, play C Jam Blues again. This time, will you play the voicings by finding your triad? And if you can't find the seventh right off, play the triad on beat 1, and then as soon as you can, change your root down to the seventh.
Right hand?
Yeah. So try that with your right. Okay? Here we go.
What do you mean?
Here's a new victim.
A new victim. Come on in. Come join us.
Pull up a piano.
Yes.
A new piano will do.
Here we go. So we are just gonna find the triad, lower the root down to the seventh. Okay?
And what are you doing with your right hand?
That's what I'm doing with my right hand.
Oh.
What I'm gonna be doing with my left hand is playing a bass line also.
I'm just.
Yeah, and you're welcome to do that. An easy way to play bass lines is to play the root and the fifth of a chord. Okay. Another way that's really, really easy is to play 1, 2, flat, 3, 3. 1, 2, flat, 3, 3. I was listening to an Oscar Peterson recording this week, and there's a whole section that's all he's doing is this with his left hand. Okay? Just the 1, 2, flat, 3, 3. So if you get going and you're thinking, I'm getting these voicings down, and you want to try adding your bass line in, also feel free. Okay? But your number one goal is to get the chord. That's your first goal here. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, go. C7, F7, C7, F7,
Glad you can't hear me.
And that's why we did it this way, so you can hear it, you can hear what I'm playing, but you get to try it on your own. It's a lot easier than hearing about it than going home and trying it. So, now, if you're playing those voicings that way, you'll find that you're still jumping around. And usually when you listen to someone playing jazz, they're not jumping around like that. So just like we do in classical music, where a composer uses usually good voice leading techniques, we do the same thing in jazz, and it makes it pretty easy. Why don't you take your headsets off for just 1 second? And I have a little example to show you here. Whenever we go from a third and a seventh to another third and a seventh, and they're next to each other on the circle of fifths, you are within 1 whole step always of the notes for the next chord. I don't have them there, that's okay. If I'm going from C to F, the third of a C chord is E. What is the seventh of the F7 chord? E flat. It's a half step apart, right? When I'm going from the seventh of C7, which is B flat, to the third of the F, so B flat, what's the third of F? Is A. So they're half step apart. Always, if you have the same type of a chord, you're going to have movement that's similar, like this. So our seventh chords, our dominant seventh chords, C7, F7, G7, If they're next to each other in the circle, they will, the third and seventh are a half step apart from each other. If you have a minor seventh chord, so it's a minor triad with a minor seventh. So for example, if we had D minor 7 to G minor 7, the third of D is F. The seventh of G minor 7 is F. So that one stays the same. The seventh of D minor is C. The third of G is B flat. So that's a whole step. So it develops a little pattern also where one stays the same, one moves by a whole step. And it does the same thing if I have major seventh chords. So we're always within a whole step if we have that third and seventh. So let me give you this sheet. I've written out some of these for you. So you can, okay. Here is the circle, and I call it circle of fourths because I'm thinking, see, up a fourth. It's circle of fifths also, if you go down. So once I get one chord happening, once I learn these patterns, I can continue them on my chords without jumping around. So that I maintain this voice leading that's happening. Go ahead and put your headsets back on, and let's show you what we can do here. So if we find our C7 chord, that we now have this new voicing of play the triad and lower the seventh. Okay. If, when I go to the F7, if I just move my bottom two notes down a half step, I now have a great voicing for F7. And so I can move those back and forth between C7 and F7. The G on top is the ninth of the next chord. And jazz players throw that in all the time without being asked to or given permission to. So I'm just playing the B flat down to the A, the E to the E flat. And if you look on this sheet, I have the thirds and sevenths alternating back and forth, but I'm just adding in that G. One reason I do that is, for me, it's a lot easier to think of major triad and then find my seventh down than to try to think what's the third of this chord, what's the seventh of this chord, and find it. I already know a triad, and then I just have to find my seventh. And then from there, just move your half step to get to the new voicing. Okay? That will take us all the way through the whole blues until we get to the third line, right? Just moving back and forth between that voicing. So when I get to a new chord, I can do one of two things. G7 is next to C7 on the circle of fifths, so I can move those by a half step. If I just move up instead of down, I have a B flat going to B, E going to F, and then I'm adding a note above that. I can do it that way, or I can choose right there to jump up and do my G triad, go down a whole step because I'm familiar with my triads and I can find that seventh really quickly. And then I can go to do the same thing on F, and then half step away from my C7. So, either way, if you keep those thirds and sevenths moving by half step, you can do that, okay? Let's try going through this now. Try finding your C7 voicing, and then we're going to move to F7 by moving the bottom two notes by a half step down, okay? Let's try it and go through as we're going through. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, go. Now move down a half step on. F7 is. Now choose and do what you'd like here with jumping up. Now here's a secret on the last one. This last measure has D minor 7 to G. This is something that we call, well, in the key of C, D minor 7 is the second chord or the 2 chord. The G7 is the 5, and then C is 1. That's a really common progression in jazz. And I'm not expecting when you look at it, go through and look at a piece of music, you say, oh, that's 2, 5, 1. But what you can recognize, if you say a minor 7th to a dominant chord, you can say, there's a pattern here. If we play D minor 7, play your D minor triad and then find your 7th. Now, think about what is the third of a G7 chord? B. How far is that away from your C? Half a step, yeah. What is the third of D minor? It's F. What's the 7th of G? It's F. So when we see that minor 7 to a dominant, usually you only have one note that has to be one half step. Like that. Just moving that bottom note down. And you're probably thinking, how am I going to remember all this? Well, you won't.
So you're doing sorry, I know I was
That's okay.
You're doing the ninth on this.
I am adding a ninth on there also. One thing you find in jazz is you do a lot of things that are not specifically spelled out in the chord that you just do because that's what sounds good. That's the #1 rule in jazz. Does it sound good or not? So, and then you figure out as you go along, okay, they're doing a lot of things that are not in there. So, yes, that we do add the ninth in on that, and it makes it really smooth voice to me. So now let's go back and play it one more time. This time when you get to that D minor chord, see if you can play that D minor 7 by finding a triad, going down, and then just move your thumb down one more when you get to the G. And you're there, okay? And then it's not too far to go back to your C7. Just drop everything down by a half step again, okay? Try it, and here we go. Ready? Playing the chords. 1, 2, a 1, 2, ready, go. Here's your 2, 2, 5, and back. Okay? So, now, how does this work? Well, if you practice these progressions, similar progressions, it's just like in classical music we practice our cadences, right? Same thing works with jazz. If you practice this 2-5 progression, it shows up over and over and over and over again. So that pretty soon you get to a point where your fingers just automatically drop down a half step. If you find the first voicing, it takes care of you for the next voicing. Or sometimes it takes care of you for several voicings in a row, because it will do a 2-5 here, and then a 2-5 in the next key, and a 2-5 in the next key. So that gets you started on that. And I have a handout here that will show you this voice leading in just a minute. But before we leave the blues, let's talk about how you solo over blues, because this is where it really gets fun. How many of you are familiar with the blues scale? Okay, somewhat. Will you share with us what the blues scale is? Actually, hang on. I don't know if
Flat 3, raised 4, regular 4, raised
Okay.
4, 5, flat 7.
So he's doing. Okay, and that is what we term the blues scale. That one is a wonderful scale. It is not the scale that is used most often by jazz players. So it's one that a lot of people have used because it sounds a lot like what they're doing. It's not to say they don't use it, but the one that's used more often is called the minor pentatonic, which is 1, flat 3, 4, 5, and then a flat 7. But just like we did with the triad, I find the easiest way to do this is to learn it is to do 1, flat 3, 4, 5, go back down hit the B flat. Okay? So, just for fun, why don't you, I'll play a few things and you play back. This is a great way to work with students. This is what we call and response. So, your turn. Okay, it gets really fun with that. You've just started solo, so that's where you start. Is listen to jazz players, imitate what they're doing, just like we just did in this. It's a great way to start with your students. So that's our minor pentatonic scale. So what I'd like you to do now for fun is I'm gonna play the chords and the bass line. I'd like you to solo, create your own solo over the top. You're the only one that can hear yourself. So have fun and do what you want to do. But that minor pentatonic scale is one that will sound good. It's what we call a blanket scale, where any note that you put in that scale fits over any of the chords in this. So you just have to worry about those notes. We have a blanket scale approach, and then we have an approach where you change the notes based on what's changing in the chord symbol as well. But the blanket approach is fantastic, and I love blues for this reason, because you can just blanket that whole scale over the whole thing. So here we go. I'm gonna comp, that's what we call it when you play the chords, and you get to solo.
So, following the C jam, or?
What happens when we solo is when you're doing a blanket approach, you just do that whole scale. So any notes, so if I were playing this, I could just do any of those notes that I wanted.
Are we in the key of C? What key are we in?
It is in the key of C, but if you're using the scale,
But if I were to do that same scale in the key of F,
Mhm.
but you were in C, would that work?
if you do the F scale, then it's gonna get a different sound. So what we're saying with the blanket scale is even though these chords are changing, your scale stays the same. That C minor pentatonic over the entire 12 bars.
Okay.
Does that make
Yep.
sense? Okay, that's a very good question. Very, very good question. So here we go. We love questions. That's how we figure out where I haven't explained things the way I should have. So here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, yeah, that's it. That's it. Okay,
Fun.
good. Now, what we do usually on blues is we play the head, we solo, and then we play the head out. Or sometimes we'll do what we call trading fours, where someone will play four measures or 4 bars, then someone else will play 4 bars, and someone else plays 4 bars, and we'll play back and forth. Okay? So, let's try playing the head. If you are really adventurous and you want to play the head and try doing the voicings as well, the chords, then move your chords to your left hand and play your melody with your right hand.
What do you mean by the head?
The head is the melody.
Okay.
So the head is the, yeah, good question. These are all jazz players' terms again. So if you ever get called on a gig, and don't say, oh, I'll never get called on a gig. I've had so many friends that call me up, help! My great aunt did this and she wants this, and you know. So yeah, the head is just the melody and the form of the piece as well. So this one is 12 bars. Okay? So if you're really adventurous and you want to play the chords and the head, the melody, go for it. We're going to play the head once, then we're going to go back and use solo, and then we'll, this time instead of playing the head or playing the solo once, we're going to just keep playing, and when I go like this means go back to the head when we get to the end of the form. That's a lot of times what you'll see happen. It'll say head, top. Okay? So here we go. Ready, go. Here's your solo. Here we go. Good. Now, what do you do with those last two chords the last time through? You can, yeah, you can shake, yeah. So, the D minor, G7, if we play those the last time through, we're gonna have. Doesn't work, does it? So those chords are only played when you're going back, right? When you get to the end, then they'll stop on the C7, right? Yeah, that's it, yeah. So, good. Headsets off for just a minute. Way to go. I know.
I need
I know.
earbuds. Do the
So,
ear thing.
what I would like to do is if we could divide it up and have, some of us, are you okay if we unplug them, Nancy, or is that gonna be a
What do
problem?
you mean unplug them?
Just so that we can all hear each other?
Oh, you
Or
can
is
just,
that-
if you know the little.
Is there one up here?
It's a little,
Oh, it's underneath.
We can do the group, or we can do group
Oh,
two on the
okay.
headset if that would be easier.
whatever.
We can do that. So what I'd like to do is have, one person volunteer to play our bass line, and then have, or two people play the bass line, two people play chords, two people play the melody, and then we'll trade fours on the solo so you can see what that's like. Does that? So, who is great, and I have a sheet here, I'll hand to you about bass lines too. So,
Patrice, yes. Yes.
here's this one. Just so you can hear, yeah, all aspects, and when you're doing the students,
Can you hear me?
it's great if you
Oh, I wasn't.
can play the bass line, and it helps them learn if they can play the bass line also, but why don't we, what if we start with bass line? Can we start bass line over here with Nancy?
Carol and Nancy.
Carol, and then chords, and then the head, and you guys will start soloing, okay, trading fours, back and forth, and then, let's try that, and then we'll switch.
So we only play what's here?
No, you can play what you'd like. That-
Well, I mean.
That's just a hint as,
Oh,
that's a typical bass line, is 1 and 5, or 1, 2, flat, 3, 3. Those are based on the chords. So that one is not a blanket approach. That one is one where you have to adjust it. So if it's on C chord, you're gonna play a C and a G, or a C, D, E flat, E. If you're on F, then you're gonna switch to F and C, okay?
Now where there's no notes, I don't play anything. Or do
That's
I
a good
ad
question.
lib?
That
Because
is a
there's
good
no
question.
rests there, so.
There's no rest. In a jazz form, in a jazz piece, if there's nothing there, you just continue with what you did the last measure.
Okay.
Yeah. So you won't see in jazz, if you look at your C jam blues here, you don't see, a chord symbol on every single measure. a chord, they just leave that there until it changes. So you
But
just
you've got rests.
I have rests on this one, yeah.
So-
That's mainly because my music program automatically
Does it?
inserts rests and it's too much time to go through it. I always forget, what is it I have to do to hide the rests on this
Yeah.
program? So, yeah, so that's, but if this were a jazz player
It would just be.
that was just writing this out, and if they wrote it out, because usually they don't always
They
write
don't
it out,
either.
you just listen and figure it out, so.
Okay.
So, let's try a bass line. So you're improvising your own bass line. You can use that idea or you can do whatever you'd like to try out. Let me just tell you this too. With improvisation, there are no wrong notes. There are some notes that will sound better than other notes to our ears, but there are not wrong notes. Some of the greatest solos and most masterful solos have come from someone playing a note, and you always wonder, did they really intend to play that note, or did they just hit that and then they got out of it so masterfully that it just sounded amazing?
Just smile.
You know? So, there are no wrong notes. So just, you'll know, if you play something and you don't like it, say, well, that was, you know, that wasn't the note I wanted to play. But,
that was a suspension.
you're always, yes, you're always within a whole step of a note that will sound good. So if you play something and think, I didn't like that sound, try a half step and then whole step away really fast and you'll find one that does. So, okay, so we have bass lines, we'll have two bass lines going on, we'll have two sets of chords going on.
And you want our chords in the right hand?
You can do either one,
That's fine.
if you wanna try it with your left hand. When I started out, I started with my right hand because I felt more comfortable with that. If I'm gonna play a bass line with it, then I'm gonna put chords in my right hand. But now, I do more of the chords with my left hand so that I can solo with my right hand.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Are we gonna hear each other then?
yes, I'm gonna put you on group, so
But
you
not
can hear
yet.
each other, okay? And then we have the head going to solos that we're gonna trade off fours.
Is he going first?
Sure.
Okay.
So he can
So
go
we're just
nice.
gonna play the head.
Head, and then go into
I'll solo,
solos,
and then you'll solo.
and then you'll
And then
solo
you'll
for
solo.
four, and then you'll solo.
Okay,
I'll solo
the
again.
head is the whole thing.
It's the whole 12 bars,
So
Okay.
12 bars. And then how long is the solo? Another
The
12
solo
bars?
is another 12 bars. So when you solo, usually you follow the same form that you followed for the main head or the main melody. Yeah. Every once in a while you have jazz players that write a different set of chord changes that they use for the solos than they did for the head. But most of the time, no. Most of the time it's the same thing. Okay? All right. So just have fun. And remember, if
Can
you
you
play
hear me
something you don't
clearly?
like, you can't hear each other yet.
Not yet,
We will.
oh, okay. But
So
I can do
chords, you
whatever I
only want us playing thirds and sevenths?
You can play thirds and sections, you can add onto it. If you're getting those done really well, another thing you can do is if you add a root and a fifth on top, or even the octave, and then you can just leave it there. When you switch to the next one, that sounds really great also.
So if we sound lousy, it's my fault.
Okay, so that it goes really loud. Okay, all right,
Okay, thank you.
so
Head
here we
first.
go. Okay, now play, I think everyone should be able to hear each other. Can you hear each other?
Could you hear me?
Not yet?
Mm-mm.
All right, let's see. We have,
Hope I can't hear me.
oh no, that one makes it so we can't hear. I may have to do.
Oh, I can hear you now.
Okay.
You got it?
Should work now. Okay, I think we got it. All right, so here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, go.
Whoop. Which measure are we on?
We're on the 7, now we're on G7, F7, C7, and here comes Lynn's solo. Okay, here we go. One more time.
You take it now.
Okay. Okay, let's do it now that we've had a chance to solo. Let's do it that we're gonna start here and everyone takes fours. I'll tell you when it's time to switch. So you'll start and do 4, 4, 4, 4.
For a solo?
Mm-hmm. First solo this time, okay?
Oh, you're
Just have fun.
picky.
Here we go. Okay, 1, 2, our first solo, ready, go. Here comes Lynn. And the trees.
Oh, my turn?
Next. And here's our favorite, everyone all at once. Here goes our head. Yeah, right. All right, go ahead and take your head to the top of your, thank you. Hey, way to go. Fantastic. That's a really fun exposure to blues and starting to read these chord symbols and improvisation. Let me give you a handout. This one, we'll go through, I know we have to end pretty quickly here, don't we?
About 5 more minutes.
Okay, so this one is showing you how voicings move from 2 5 1s. And I have done 10 steps for going through practicing them. These are, you already are past the first few steps, but these are ways that you might choose to introduce them to students as they're wanting, if they're wanting to do reading lead sheets or something else like this. But if you'll flip over to the back page,
One more, please.
absolutely, yes. On the back page, this is what we were just starting with, these 2 5 1 progressions. You notice that we have the D minor chord that we just did to the G7, and then if the progression finishes out, which sometimes it does in the music, there's your major 7th, and you can see how that will continue on. The 2 5 is really easy, it just moves that thumb down a half step. But if it continues on to the 1 chord, which is a major 7th chord, then the top 2 notes will move down by a half step and a whole step each. But that goes through this process over and over again. This is one place where if you are interested for yourself in learning to read chord symbols more quickly, this is where I would start, is learning these 2 5 1 progressions, because you will see them show up. I opened up, the Sandy chapter asked me to do a presentation specifically. I know you have to go
I have to
to
go,
it.
Caroline, will you log up?
I don't have a key, but I think it just
It's
clicks
on-
automatically,
It's
right?
on the
That,
door.
that's all, yeah.
Oh, I
Turn off the light, otherwise I'm in trouble.
We're good.
Thank
I gotta
you.
go.
Yes, thank you, Nancy. So, that's a place where if you want to build your chord reading quickly, that's where you can do. If you have students, you know, say you have a student who is in the same situation that I was in, where they make it into a jazz band and they have to read chord symbols and they don't know what to do. These are steps that I've gone through with students to help them. But starting with these chord progressions, they're just like practicing 1 4 5 cadences. It's just that we all started practicing 1 4 5 cadences when we were young, and so now it's like, oh, I can do it without even thinking about it, right? This becomes the same way if you just practice them or how students practice them a little bit. And then they just, all of a sudden, if you can find that first chord, think the minor triad down a whole step, your fingers just start automatically going in that pattern. Now, you can practice these by going around the circle and then make your C chord into your C minor 7 and then change it. I have some flashcards, and if I get your emails from you, I will email those to you. I didn't want to print off all of those, but I will email them to you. that
Send
have
it
a-
to me, I can send it
Okay,
out.
that's perfect, I'll do that. Because you have to do that starting on D, and then once you've gone around the circle and make it back to D, you have to bump up a half step to get the other 6 keys. But this is a very fast way. I also have flashcards that I have done for students where they can practice reading the different types of 7th chords, just individually. And the way I do that is I have them first go through and play the 7th, only the 7th, to think what that 7th is. Then we go back and we play the triad, because they're fast with the triads, but once they can think that 7th, once they can think the triad, then it's not hard to move the thumb and hit the 7th also. And I have those, the flashcards for the 7th chords, I just have written the chords out. I haven't put them on the back, but the 2 5 1s on one side have the chord symbols, and then if you print it back to back, it has the notes, so you can flip it over and check to see if you did it correctly. And it, hopefully if my spacing works out for you like it does for me, then it will print in the same place.
So are the flashcards in different inversions and voicings, or are they just all?
They're all in
one
this inversion,
Oh,
like
okay.
this, where they, because this is one, I will tell you that I did learn, these types of voicings once I got through my trauma of All-State High School jazz band first year, and I'm like, I'm not doing that ever again, and I found a jazz teacher. And that jazz teacher had me start learning the 3rds and 7ths of the chords. He didn't show me how to take the triad and then move the 7th, and if he had, it would have gone a lot faster. But at least I started learning how to read the 3rds and 7ths and doing the voice leading. And, that carried me through, so that now, you know, but
But
I
it
still
sounds
use
like
the
you're gonna
same-
learn it different if you're playing with an ensemble versus playing alone.
If you play these voicings like this, I do that same thing, when I play with an ensemble. I do that when I play solo. I just might add my bass note in. So I might play this, and then jump up and play my voicing. So I still use that a whole lot. It's the core, I would say about 80% of everything that I ever play with jazz, I use those same voicings. I just add to them, we call that the shell. If you get that 3rd, 7th, and whatever, 5th or 9th you're adding in there, you do that, then you have all this freedom to add other stuff on top of that. And if you listen to Bill Evans or Oscar Peterson, any of these great jazz players, that's what they're doing on so much of what they're doing. It's not the only thing they're doing, but it's the core. So this is like your major scales, your major 5-finger patterns, your cadences for classical students are the core. Once they learn that, it gives them the technique, the muscle memory that shows up again in the pieces. That's what this is. It's your hook in that you don't spend an hour trying to figure out how to voice these chords and then you go back and you can't remember what you did before. Which is what I did. Trying to save you some pain and suffering.
So
But-
high school jazz All-State pays off eventually.
Eventually. Yeah. Any other quick questions that you have? I know we need to finish up.
This is like baptism
It
by
is baptism by fire. And the thing I will
Yeah,
just
but
tell
you explained it very clearly.
that,
I'm excited.
just remember that it takes, it takes years for kids to practice this, for us to practice our other stuff and to start to feel fluent and everything. It's not gonna feel fluent immediately, but hopefully, just looking at those and finding the triad and lowering it as, a whole step gives you some ways to quickly get into a lead sheet and have some clue. And if you've practiced these voicings, even if you spent just a brief 5 minutes a day for a month on it, you'd be amazed at how quickly you're gonna implement that into lead sheets, if you're doing lead sheet writing, or how quickly it is for students. I've had students who've gone on to audition for All-State Jazz Band and have done very well after just, 6 months of practicing these chords, reading it that way. So, anyway,
Very good.
there you go.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. This
Thanks
has
for
been
coming.
Absolutely wonderful.
So glad that you could.
Yes.
Thank you.
You are welcome.